what you wanna do. Then take a good look at what's looking real good to you. Think real hard about what it is you see. Is that really where you wanna be? Look real hard and long, see what's going on. It's a fool's thing.
News Radio 1000 KTOK. Gwin Faulconer-Lippert here with you on this Sunday evening. Great guest coming up next on the program. What about the loops and the turnpikes and all that is going on around the state of Oklahoma? Well, whenever you talk about the Oklahoma Department of Transportation and what they are doing, there's my go-to guy, and his name is Tom Elmore. He is an independent transportation consultant, and I have been on KTOK coming up now on, I think, 38 years. And Tom Elmore is one of my favorite guests in that he stays on top of what is going on. So welcome to 1000 KTOK, Tom Elmore. This would not be the first time we talked about loops and Oklahoma Department of Transportation and town hall meetings, is it, Tom?
No, ma'am, not hardly, and thank you for having me this evening.
Well, let's talk about what is going on. Bring everybody up to date. Let me ask you this question. Should we be talking about this? Because here is what the message that's going out. We're having town hall meetings to tell you all about what we're going to take to make these fabulous new turnpikes to make transportation better. And after we tell you it's a done deal, maybe we'll change one little thing or two little things, but you really don't have any say in it. Is that accurate?
That's accurate, absolutely accurate. And this in a nation which is founded on the God-given rights of the people to life, liberty, and property, and government of, by, and for the people, a government which exists to secure the rights of the citizenry and to rule by the consent of the governed. Well, the governed were consulted, Gwin, in this matter. And this is quite typical for the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority, which actually is being merged into the Oklahoma Department of Transportation behind the scenes. We've known since 1995, when Frank Keating made Neil McCaleb director of both agencies, as well as Secretary of Transportation, that the wraps were off and the two agencies were actually the same outfit, the same people. But the charade has continued. Today we have Tim Gatz, a landscape architect, who is director of both agencies and also secretary. I've known him a long time. I don't mean to seem insulting, but this is not a man for these kinds of responsibilities. This is not a man for a vision for a transportation system for the future for the state. This is a yes man being puppeteered by the Association of General Contractors.
But is it under the guise of public-private partnership? How can we have a private enterprise, which is the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority, that has a board of directors, they make a profit, all that stuff, and with our government?
Well, check out the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority's website. Look at their board of directors. You will find a bunch of names, probably of people you've never heard of, and no biographies. Who are these people? Why are they there? We know this. One of the more recent chairman of the board of the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority, Albert C. Kelly, a banker from Tulsa, the highway lobby's banker, but he was unhorsed by the FDIC and banned from banking for life when he was still chairman of the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority. This seems to be the quality of individuals that we can expect of this agency. This is a matter of public record. And it is mighty strange to me that the argument has been the Turnpike Authority was established because it is unconstitutional for a state agency to do what the Turnpike Authority does.
Which is
notably,
what? Yes, what?
Well, letting these bonds, financing these bonds independently of public expenditures. And so, in effect, it's a private outfit operating in the robes of state with the power of eminent domain, if required, to take people's property away from them. And it's recently been revealed, I haven't independently verified this, but it's been suggested that some of the investors, some of the bondholders, are such outfits as BlackRock. This is an implication of foreign investors, Gwin, ultimately already holding bonds on the existing roads, apparently doing pretty well. And yet they are now targeting Oklahoma homes and landowners to move them aside so they can build more such roads so they can profit further. The state does not benefit from these turnpikes at all in terms of revenue. However, one man, Tim Gatz, is director of both agencies. And consider this, Gwin. On the public roads under his management, we've managed to rack up, they claim, $60 billion in unfunded maintenance requirement on the state's public road network. All they can do with the poor old public roads is lose money like a house afire. But they're making money hand over fist on turnpikes. Well, isn't there something fundamentally wrong with this picture? The same people?
Well, it doesn't seem palatable. Let me say it that way.
Well, let's put it like this. As we've said before about ODOT and the public roads, in its history, the state of Oklahoma has never once completed an analysis called a highway cost allocation study to publicly establish what each class of vehicles using public roads returns to the public for the use of their highways.
And do other states do that?
Oh, yes, they do. But the question is, if you own 10 miles of road or let's say a toll bridge, wouldn't you have to know what you needed to charge and be certain to charge that in order to have a hope of succeeding? And yet the argument is, well, we can't afford to build major road projects as public roads in Oklahoma. We don't have the money. Of course you don't. You've methodically mismanaged, misused the public roads for the last 40 years. And you've done this to benefit the inner city trucking industry. The last numbers that I saw, which were actually an interpolation, an estimate of by a national organization of what heavy trucks return for the use of Oklahoma's public roads, indicated 2.93 cents a mile in the late 90s. Mm-hmm. Well, let's give them some leeway, and maybe they return a nickel a mile. To use the Turner Turnpike, that heavy truck has to pay a minimum of 20.8 cents a mile. Now, here's the kicker. Tim Gatz is the director of both agencies. If he gets a righteous return from heavy trucks on the turnpikes in order to get his anonymous bondholders a profit, why doesn't he give the poor old taxpayers the same benefit for all of the investment they've made in their roads, which he is supposed to be managing, and Gwin, he's supposed to be protecting them, but he's not.
So are you suggesting that if we charge trucks enough, we could make the turnpikes free for cars?
Well, the deal about the turnpikes is this. It's very simple. Oklahoma was sold a pig in a poke back in the late 40s when the Turnpike Authority was put together. And the plan was, we're going to build 3 roads. We're going to build the Bailey, the Turner, and the Rogers Turnpikes. And when those roads are paid off, that'll be the end of the Turnpike Authority, and we will return these roads to the state of Oklahoma for management. They will be public toll-free roads.
And why is that?
That didn't happen.
Yeah, why has that never happened?
Well, they'll always tell you there was another election in which the people acceded to the idea that we could cross-pledge and we could continue to use monies from turnpikes that were effectively making good money to build those that weren't. And today, they got, they say about $1.8 billion in standing debt, but they want to increase that with this new project, $5 billion more in bond debt.
So somehow
Well,
we never get to the point where we could pay it off.
No, in fact, at this rate of return, it would take 80 years to pay off these new roads. 80 years. Meanwhile, the public's roads are suffering. Have you noticed the state of the public roads? Managed by Mr. Tim Gatz, landscape architect. Who is this guy?
So he has no engineering background whatsoever?
He is a landscape architect, Gwin. And he was brought up through the ranks at ODOT, apparently because he will say yes to whatever the Association of General Contractors wants. This is serious business. You call it malfeasance. And he is backed in this by a transportation commission, which honestly is pretty much a rogues gallery of developers, inner-city truck line CEOs, and such as this. Is there anybody on the Oklahoma Transportation Commission who is looking out for the good of the owners of these roads, the people of Oklahoma? I'm talking about the public roads now. And these people well understand that ODOT and OTA are being merged behind the scenes, such that today the Public Information Department of ODOT is also the Public Information Department of the Turnpike Authority. Well, it's unconstitutional.
So
why are we allowing this?
Yeah, why are we allowing this? I'll tell you, that's a good cliffhanger. I've got to take a break. Talking with Tom Elmore, and he is bringing us up to speed on the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority. We're going to talk about the Kickapoo Turnpike, and we're going to talk about eminent domain and all of the homes that are being uprooted. Is that just progress, or what does Tom think about it? You know, he has had some successes by these arguments that he has presented to me before. I hope that you will stick around and hear about that. You're listening to 1000 KTOK. I'm Gwin Faulconer-Lippert, back in 4 minutes. News Radio 1000 KTOK, Gwin Faulconer-Lippert. Reading from the Norman transcript. They went back in their archives and dug out this information. Norman residents who fought in an old battle have pulled themselves out of the ruins of a defeated toll road in 1999 to stare down yet another, then called loop. The Oklahoma Turnpike Authority planned to build toll roads in a loop around the east side of Oklahoma City Metro as far back as 1987. Governor Henry Bellman signed House Bill 1259 into law July of 1987, authorizing Oklahoma Turnpike Authority to build turnpikes throughout the state. The loop included a proposed toll road in East Norman. Joining me this evening is Tom Elmore, and he was there for this bit of history. He is now an independent transportation consultant. Tom, what do you remember about how you defeated the outer loop?
We went to every meeting. We demanded answers. We would not take no for an answer from these people. And we recognized that actually the effort was being fronted apparently by the Oklahoma Department of Transportation under Neil McCaleb. However, we understood very well that if these roads were built, they would be built as turnpikes. And we understood that just as having one man as director of both agencies, ODOT and turnpikes, that was a conflict of interest. Having ODOT propose and promote the idea of a project we knew would be built as turnpikes, this is a conflict of interest. This is a crashing conflict of interest. And today, this governor, Mr. Stitt, comes into a state where the people of Oklahoma, under COVID and all this other pressure for a couple of years now, have had just about all they can take. And he jumps up and 6, the thugs of the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority on them, threatening their homes and their way of life? What's wrong with people like that, Gwin?
Well, and as I understand it, this turnpike will move more families, interrupt their property and all that than any other turnpike in our history, correct?
650 plus homes in the proposed route and 1,100 homes within a half mile of the toll road. I mean, this will completely change the environment of semi-rural East Cleveland County, just as it has along the so-called Kickapoo Turnpike in eastern Oklahoma County, north of Interstate 40. The way of life was completely changed there by a bunch of people who just walked in and decided they were going to do this without consulting the land and homeowners there, many of whom have owned that property since before statehood.
Mm-hmm. So what can they do?
Well, they can stand and fight. And unfortunately, the law is written away with an authority that at a statutory level, the people don't have much of a lever to battle, except the governor himself can stop this. You know, we had a fellow running for the governor's office. He ran a couple of times, who had been U.S. attorney back in 1984, who convicted 165 dirty county commissioners, taking kickbacks for themselves with everything they did. And this man ran for governor, and his number one item was, we'll abolish the Turnpike Authority. It's a criminal organization.
And that would be Gary Richardson, right?
That's right. That's right. He didn't get elected. But isn't it strange that a man of his reputation, and he has a national reputation as an attorney, would make this charge against the Turnpike Authority? And that when he decided to run for governor again, a couple of well-known Turnpike backers, Frank Keating and Kel Kelly, are said to have come to him hat in hand, begging him to back off. I assure you, this is a dirty organization. It needs to be independently investigated and audited, and it needs to be abrogated, Gwin. I mean, the thing of it is, I've asked the question, why in a state as poor as we're often told Oklahoma is, why is it that we need 2 highway departments? Well, the reason is this, because the job of ODOT has come to be keeping the money flowing to the contractors at any cost. And if you can't do it with public money because of your serial mismanagement of the public's property, the public's roads, then you can do it with turnpikes. And hey, we'll just make the same guy director of both agencies. By the way, Gwin, it's fascinating to me that Mr. Gatz makes more money than the governor does. He makes $185,000 a year. The governor only makes $147,000 a year. Isn't that odd?
Is that to be argued because he has 2 jobs?
Well, he's got 3 jobs. He's also Secretary of Transportation. He's supposed to be the guy who's setting the vision for the state of Oklahoma for the future. He doesn't have any such vision. He's one of these people at ODOT who destroyed the very unique 900-mile state-owned railway property, which always made enough money to provide for its own maintenance, the only paying property ODOT ever had. So they've destroyed it. They've spun it off. That was never supposed to happen to that property. These people have no vision except the next highway. And it is something that the people of Oklahoma need to get hold of and recognize. I call it the problem template. I would argue that it has really grown up around transportation.
We will begin with the problem template. I have to pause for an update from Fox News. Talking with Tom Elmore, a transportation consultant, talking about once was called the Outer Loop. Now it's the extension of the Kickapoo Turnpike. Talking with Tom Elmore, an independent transportation consultant who was there the last time they tried to get this passed, and he and his friends in Norman were able to defeat this. So, Tom, you mentioned the template. What is the template of which you speak?
Well, it is the corporatization, Gwin, of government. We've had warning after warning from the beginning of this republic by people warning us that government of, by, and for the people has to be jealously protected by the people themselves, and that when they take their eye off the ball, there are legions of special interest waiting to turn government to their interest away from the people's interest. As the late Jim Townsend used to say, Tom, the old government model was tax dollars ought to be spent to serve public interest, public convenience, and public necessity. But now that's been flipped on its head, and what we have and what we're getting more and more from Oklahoma state government is commonized costs, privatized profits. Yeah, let the old people, let the people at large act as the receptacle for your debts and your mistakes and your foul ups, and your buddies can scoop the profits off the top. That's not what our government is for.
That is so discouraging. Okay, so let's formulate a plan. For the Kickapoo Turnpike, they say it is a done deal. We have chosen the route. And I know quite a few people that it takes the front off their houses. It divides up their land. It does all kinds of stuff. How do you defeat that? Do you approach the governor, as you said before? Do you go to town hall meetings and yell at people? What's the plan?
Well, all of the above. We need to be heard. The people need to be heard, and the landowners need to be heard. There are state law authorizes, I think it's 16 turnpike projects all over the state. So just as quickly as this was announced in February, for the uninitiated, a number of us expected it. But for the uninitiated, it seemed that all of a sudden Governor Stitt jumped up in February and announced, hey, we're going to come and take your house. Well, he could do this all over the state. And the people of Oklahoma need to recognize this. Friends, if they can do it to your neighbors and your fellow Oklahomans in order to serve the profits of a bunch of anonymous investors, many of whom are apparently foreign investors, they can do it to you. And we all need to stand up together and tell them no.
Well, what about the environmental concerns? It runs right by Lake Thunderbird, which is a drinking water aquifer.
Well, it runs right over the Garber-Wellington aquifer.
Yes.
It will interrupt the Lake Thunderbird watershed. It will threaten the drinking water supply for 500,000 metropolitan residents here, and it's also a habitat for endangered animal species, bald eagle nests, and all kinds. It's a wildlife corridor for the movement and migration of wildlife out that way. The Turnpike Authority has made it quite clear they don't care, and because they're funding this with non-governmental money, they figure they can do anything they want to do, and we can't stop it. You remember back when they were ODOT was destroying Oklahoma City Union Station, and Tom Roach had a political club out in Northwest Oklahoma City and asked me if I would debate the people at ODOT about this. And I said, sure, I'd debate them. Well, they couldn't get anybody at ODOT to debate, but they got a couple of guys who came out. When the debate was over, the sponsor, the moderator, said, Tom, I was shocked they didn't have an argument. Well, they did have an argument, Gwin, and the argument was, we're going to do this, and you can't stop us. This is precisely the argument that's being made by OTA on these eastern projects. We're going to do this, and you can't stop us.
So
that is not American government.
What kind of government is that?
Well, it is corporatized. What do you call it, Gwin, when corporations and government get together to raid the public till and push the people around? There's a name for it. That fellow over in Italy during World War II said, we really shouldn't call it fascism. We should call it corporatism. Well, that's what we've got. Under the hand of a Republican governor who was, elected as a man of the people, blah, blah, blah. These people are acting as corporate thugs against the interest of the people and against their property rights and their rights to live as they please.
And what do you say to people that say, well, you're just against progress? You know, these highways are going to bring progress.
You know, it's a funny thing about that whole business. I remember very well a man that now deceased that I used to know who would talk about driving from the Will Rogers Turnpike in northeastern Oklahoma into southwestern Missouri, into the Joplin area there. And he would say, because the turnpike limits access to the surrounding communities and limits business development along the roadway, going into southwestern Missouri is like going from East Germany into West Germany.
Oh my.
Well, that's very much the case. And if you look along the Bailey and the Turner and the Rogers Turnpikes, you will see very, very limited development of the small communities and of business potential along those roads. It's the same thing here. If we're going to build a road, let's build a public road, and let's get the people involved on what configuration that road should take. Let's get the people involved in their government, making decisions about their lives and their property, instead of having a bunch of corporate bosses and overlords puppeteering some guy, putting him in 3 offices simultaneously, which, Gwin, please, the man serves simultaneously as secretary and director of ODOT and director of turnpikes, and he's a landscape architect? Give me a break. Come on. It's an absurdity. This guy's, have you ever worked for anybody? Have you ever made more money than your boss, Gwin?
No.
This guy makes more money than the governor makes. Why? Because he reports directly. He reports directly to the corporate interests which are puppeteering Oklahoma's transportation bureaus.
Is there any way to reverse eminent domain?
Well, eminent domain, it comes with the Turnpike Authority, unfortunately. We need to do away with the Turnpike Authority. We can do that by initiative petition. That's a long, involved process. And, of course, as you may be aware, our fine state legislature is now raising the bar.
Yes, they're making it even more difficult to get an initiative petition through the process. Yes.
Isn't that strange? It is important, once again, that the people be heard on these things and that we maintain our voice in our government to the degree possible. We made a horrible mistake in 1990 when we voted in the 12-year term limit. Now we have a bunch of guys who serve whoever bought them the seat for 12 years so they can get the carrot out on the end of the stick. A better job at the end of the 12 years.
What an interesting take on that. Tom Elmore is my guest. Tom, I need to take another break. When we come back, we'll let him school us more on what is happening with the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority, the Oklahoma Department of Transportation, and our Secretary of Transportation. Would you let them take your property and your home for a highway of the future? I think that's what the question comes down to. Gwin Faulconer-Lippert. What if the Oklahoma Department of Transportation came to you and said, we're going to build a highway through your property? Now, would that change the value of your property? Would that change the way your property drains and all of those things? Joining me is Tom Elmore. He is an independent transportation consultant. And I bring that up, Tom, because a friend of mine said when they built a highway through the middle of his property, the way it now drains and everything, there's so much erosion and all that it's almost destroyed the whole habitat. And, we hear some of these people on the news talk about, the runoff from the highway now and all that. Is there anything you can do about that?
Well, more than that, they certainly did that. But more than that, they destroyed the county roads with their construction vehicles. And they refused to pay for the destruction of those roads. When the overwhelming atmosphere in the meetings that the Turnpike Authority has had, being fronted by Poe and Associates engineers. Who is Poe and Associates engineers? David Streb, president. John Bowman, vice president. Craig Moody, whatever he is. These guys for 30 years were engineers with the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. And now they're big shots with big corporate business pushing people around. It's Frank Herbert, the fellow who wrote Dune, said, all governments suffer a recurring problem. Power attracts pathological personalities. It's not that so much that power corrupts, but that it is magnetic to the corruptible. And they tell us, oh, the hardest thing we have to do is to push people off of their land. No, it's not, or they'd quit doing it. They do it because they enjoy it, Gwin. They're sociopaths.
You don't think
And
they're
these
doing
people
it in the line of progress, or to connect Tinker with the Turner Turnpike or whatever? You don't think that's part of it?
Well, it's just so much baloney. I will never forget Congressman at the Kickapoo Turnpike meeting back on, I believe it was February 18th, 2016. They literally had that building stacked up with armed policemen to intimidate the public which had come in there. And their congressman, Steve Russell, got up and threw in with the Turnpike Authority. And I said at that moment, that'll be the end of him in that office. And it was.
It was.
But it was too late. It was too late to help the property and landowners out there whose lives had been unalterably changed. And in this case, the folks down in East Cleveland County were in along Indian Hill Road. They want to build a crossover to Newcastle, Gwin, across Indian Hill Road. An up to 1,200-foot wide expressway across Indian Hill Road.
Indian Hill Road?
That's right. And interestingly, the property at the intersection of I-35 and Indian Hill Road, lying at the border between Moore and Norman,
yes,
has already been purchased. But, Gwin, it's been purchased by the Oklahoma Department of Transportation.
Ah.
Once again, same people, same agency. We need to do away with the Turnpike Authority with extreme prejudice. And then we need to hold the Department of Transportation, first of all, to employ people qualified to do the job, not landscape architects. People who will do the job, who will level with the people, and who will take care of the public's roadway property instead of just letting it go and stacking up debt. And of course, you can change your hat. One minute you're at ODOT where you're losing money like a house afire. The next minute you're the director of turnpikes where you're making money hand over fist. Which are you? Jesus said you can't serve two masters. And the implication there is that if some man comes to you and tells you, I'm serving two masters, one of those masters is getting the short end of the deal. Well, who do you figure it is? The anonymous investors of the Turnpike Authority? Or the poor old taxpayers of the state of Oklahoma?
So the two things that can be done are vote out ODOT and vote out the governor?
Well, the governor could stop all of this. And this governor has made quite clear that he's in with them. He's in with this deal. We have an election coming up. We have a primary election coming up in June. I'm not telling anybody
June 28th.
Who to vote for.
Right.
Yes, ma'am. Happens to be my birthday, by the way.
Happy birthday.
Yes, indeed. The thing is, people need to look very seriously at their candidates and recognize who is on their side when it comes to upholding their word, their voice in their government, and their God-given rights to life, liberty, and property. And the word from OTA is, we're going to move y'all, and if you won't move, we'll come and move you.
Well, what about the actions of the Norman City Council and the representative and state senator from Norman? I mean, they've kind of stood up and, are trying to do something.
Well, they've spoken up. They've done well.
Yes.
And by the way, as far as I know, Senate Bill 1610 is now before the House, and Senate Bill 1610 will demand that the Turnpike Authority at least provide real studies of what they're proposing to do. There are no studies, Gwin. They haven't made any studies. They haven't consulted anybody. They haven't involved the people in this at all. Senate Bill 1610, call your state House member and urge them to support passage of House Bill 1610, or rather Senate Bill 1610, which is, it's Senate Bill 1610, and it is before the Oklahoma State House now. It's
Gotcha.
already been approved, as I understand it, by the state Senate.
Okay, and it would slow these things down.
It would slow them down, but more than this needs to be done. We need the Turnpike Authority gone. If we're going to have a transportation department, let's have it, and let's have a responsible transportation department accountable to the people of the state and not to a bunch of big shots.
If people want to get in touch with you, Tom, what's the best way?
Reach me at 405-831-3860.
Okay.
I would urge you, check out on Facebook the No More Turnpikes Oklahoma page on Facebook. Also check out a new nonprofit organization. I'm not a member. I'm not in anything to do. I'm just one of the people who admire the work these folks are doing. But it's Pike Off OTA, PIKEOFFOTA.com. Great bunch of people doing tremendous work, but many of these people's homes are in the crosshairs of this project, and they are fighting well and they are fighting hard, but they need the support of all the people in Oklahoma who believe in accountable government, Gwin.
PikeOffOTA.com.
That's right. Pike Off, PIKEOFFOTA.com. Check it out.
Thank you, Tom Elmore. I appreciate all of your hard work. You know, Tom was part of the people that defeated this last century, last millennium. It can be done. Thank you, Tom.
Positively. Thank you, ma'am.
Best of luck to you. I'm Gwin Louise Culvert Faulconer-Lippert. I believe that gratitude is everything. I thank you all for listening this evening, and take action. Be a part of what is going on. It could be your turn next time, and it could be your home next time. And all we're asking is for a plan and a real discussion, not just eminent domain. So I thank Tom Elmore for bringing us up to speed, and I thank all of you for listening. Gwin Louise Culvert Faulconer-Lippert, I believe that gratitude is everything. Good night, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Together in this, together is strong. And never alone.